Hello folks, this time we're looking at a bit of layout building. I'm going to try and build the baseboards for my new project, but first I thought we'd go through the plan. It seems sensible to have one. So, the original plan was to get a series of baseboards cut that had sort of standard sections like that, with a few cutouts and things, and do some sort of tab and slot construction. Now, I did all the computer-aided design artwork for this. As you know, that's kind of my thing. But I got quoted 180 quid for a set of baseboards that would have been 1.2 metres by 350 millimetres. And frankly, I'm nowhere near that budget. So, plan 1, scrapped. Plan 2 was to cut, well, plan 2, go down to local hardware DIY type shop and buy a massive sheet of plywood, 2.4 metres by 1.2 I think, and from that go to their in-store cutting service, because quite a few of these places have those now, and they'll cut a sheet of plywood down. They'll do 5 or 6 cuts for free or something like that, into any size you like. So the plan was, get a big sheet of plywood, cut it down into a few different strips, so we would have one strip that was 275 millimeters. This is the planned height I want for the back seam. That's so that it will fit under my bed so I can store it somewhere. I would have one strip that was 350, that's the depth I want for the main baseboard, and I would have one strip that was 45, hopefully you can see some of these numbers. So I'd chuck all this in the car, bring it home, just use an ordinary saw to cut it down into sections. So I would cut a couple of sections the same length for the ends. I've cut that off the wrong bit, haven't I? Well demonstrated to me. So I cut a couple of sections the same length as, or the same width as the baseboard to go on the ends. That'll be one. Let's cut that down to 1.2 metres, which is about there I reckon. To have one for the back seam, and all this means is that I'm just doing some very nice simple straight cuts, and I don't need to do all that much complicated measuring because all the same bits are the same width already, done by someone with a nice precision machine. So all that means is that I can set up the bits like this. I'm not very good at houses of cards, so you'll have to bear with me. And it would look something like that, if you can see what's going on there. And all this would be nice and even and cut in straight lines because they've done all the big long cuts for me. And the last bit would be used to sort of just cut in sections and brace the underneath of the main baseboard section. So that was plan 2. Cut that, put a load of bits of that underneath, job done. That didn't work. They had massive sheets of plywood where I went yesterday, but their big cutting machine was out of order because their staff didn't have the necessary training, and the training person wasn't around for the next 2 months or something like that. Ridiculous. So we now move on to plan 3. Plan 3 was buy a much smaller sheet of plywood that actually fits in the car. Then use that, cut in half-ish, to form these two bits, the back seam and the main board. So like that. and then use some scrap I've got lying around to just cap the ends off and form the various bits of bracing and strip underneath. It probably won't look as good, probably won't be as neat, but that's all I can really do with the resources I've got to hand. So that is what we're going to do. Now, I have the layout plan here. This is planned in AnyRail, a bit of free software that's pretty useful for this sort of thing. I'm just going to spin the camera around and can have a look at that, something we've actually got space to look at that. So here we go. This is the track plan. So the idea is here that I've adjusted, so since last night's change of plan, I've adjusted this track plan to fit a standard sheet of ply this way. So that length is now 1220mm. This width here is 330, I think. Basically this width here is 607mm, which is the width of a standard piece of plywood, minus the 275 height of the back seam here. So all I'm going to do is just slice one cut straight down the middle of the plywood, or well, slightly offset from the middle, and then we have our back seam and our board without having to do any extra cutting. So hopefully that should keep things nice and accurate. I don't really have the tools here to do any particularly precision work, or to keep any lines particularly straight, so I'm doing all of this on a handsaw. So I want to make sure I can get it as few cuts as possible and get the ones that I do have to do as accurate as possible. So I think it's time to go and get on with that. Right, welcome to this dimly lit grotto of various things, and of course plenty of junk, being a standard UK garage. So we have big bit of wood, what I bought yesterday. Smaller bit of scrap, but same kind of thing, same thickness. Smaller bit of scrap. Thinner. This is only 5.5mm, everything else is 9mm. But this happens to be exactly the right height for the sides, so I might use that for the sides so I don't have to cut anything. I also have a few tools. Glue, pencil, decent saw, I think this is a fine cut version, tape measure, screws, gloves so I don't get splinters everywhere, a couple of bits of alley angle as well in case I decide this needs further support, because buying your plywood from a hardware shop like I did is pretty much asking for warp. So let's have a quick look down the side. Yeah, there's a little bit of warp on that. What I'm hoping is that we can strengthen it out with some of the bracing, but we'll find out, I guess. So yeah, that's all the raw materials I've got. Bench is behind me, so I think I'm just going to crack on with it. Okay, let's just adjust that a little bit. Right, got my main plank of wood. This side is the nicer looking of the two sides. This edge is the cleanest edge of the two sides. So this half here is going to be the back seam, or the outside of the back seam if you see what I mean. And that side, because it's got quite a rough edge down there, that's going to be the baseboard because I can hide that. There's a few manufacturer markings on the back as well, so this will be the side that faces out. Now, back seam I want to be the same size as this bit of wood, this is going to form the edges. So what I'm going to do is mark up against this. I'm not going to measure it, I'm going to actually use the actual bit of wood. Mark once at this end, mark at that end, and then join a line up, and it should be exactly the same. If you are a good woodworker or professional worker, this would be an excellent time to stop watching, because I'm about to do lots of things that you're probably not going to like very much. And what I'm actually going to do here is use the saw to mark the end, because then that takes into account the width of the saw blade as well. that's put me a decent mark in this end. Let's go and do the other end. That's given me a couple of marks there, so now I need to join those up in a straight line. What I should have also checked is that my edge here is straight, which it is. That's pretty good. Turns out these bits of aluminium angle are really good for making long rulers, so that's another useful thing. But I need a little bit extra to bridge that gap, so I'll go do that, mark up that line, and then cut it. So there we go. Only took me a few seconds to get through all that lot, but we've got a nice, reasonably straight cut at the end of that. Hopefully no one will notice. The other thing you might notice I did was clamp down some of the stuff on here. It's always worth doing. Clamps like this are not particularly expensive. These ones are about, I think, 7 or 8 quid each when I bought them. But they make themselves worth their while. So we now have back scene, main layout board, and they're all ready to length. So next job is cut down sides to length. So I need to work that out, and that length is going to be essentially that distance from here to the back over there. So I'm going to measure that up and start cutting those down. So we're looking at the back scene again now. Hopefully what you can see here is that I've drawn a line. Yeah, good at woodwork I am. Anyway, I've drawn a line at this point because this is where I want the main baseboard to sit. So this will be the space underneath for the electronics and so on. And above that line, at certain intervals, I have drawn, sort of at set intervals, I've drawn a point where I'm going to pre-drill and countersink holes for all the screws that are going to hold this bit to the main board. I don't have big enough clamps to do that properly, so I'm going to have to do it with screws, hence measuring and marking all that out. So I'm going to go through, pre-drill all these holes, countersink them all, and then try and think of a way of lining everything up while it glues together. Right, the camera's running a bit low on battery, so I'm not going to be filming all of the rest of this, but the plan from now on is cut another strip of wood 45mm high, which is the same height as this line. That's going to be the front sort of face, the layout. Then I use that bit of wood, stick this up this way, line that bit of wood up down this side, sit the baseboard on top of that, and that gives me a nice flat reference point so I can drill all of these screws in from the back and put a strip of glue down it as well. The screws are just there to hold it in place while it dries. The glue is actually doing the strength. So plan to do that. Same thing for the ends, line up, loads of screws through. The only difference with the ends is that I'm planning to put a bit of this aluminium strip down the end like that to protect the corners, and also to sort of hide the worst of my cutting skills. And that's pretty much it. After that it will just be cutting a little more of those 45mm strips to go sort of as bracing crossways along the layout. And after that it's pretty much done. So I'll try and show you as much of that as I can, but obviously I haven't got much camera left, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, slight difference in video and audio quality here because I'm filming this on my phone, but hopefully you can see what's going on. main board, one of the ends, on the sides, and you can see what I've been doing here. So here's a line I've marked. Half the thickness of the wood above, I've drilled a load of holes. Put a seam of glue down on the back of this panel here, and then just use the screws to clamp it in place. So there's quite a few down there, and I've actually done the same thing up the side here and across the side here, using one of the bits of strip that I cut earlier to line that up so I know that the top is flat. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll get on with the rest. So you can see a bit more progress has happened since. Now looking at the underside, and I've fitted the 2 cross braces in the middle. Next job is sanding everything down, but just before that, these cross braces, I've cut a couple of triangles out of each one, so I've got somewhere to stick wires through and so on, so they don't have to come up and over the braces. And the other point to work out is you have to be fairly careful where you put them along this way. So what I've done is I've got a printout of the track layout, stuck it on the top of the board, and then drilled through in a couple of key places, so hopefully we can see this. There's one hole here and one here for a couple of places that the points come through, so I'll be dropping point wires through this. That helps you to just line it up in the middle so you don't end up trying to put a point motor where there's a brace or anything like that. I'll try and put in an image of the layout with the track plan on from the top so you can see how that's looking at the moment as well. It's a little bit tricky to see in the light, but the whole thing's had, or the outside surface at least, have had a coat of Danish oil now. So hopefully that will flash off fairly soon and I can get on with a coat of varnish. Let's just try and protect it a little bit. But yeah, we're coming on alright, I think. So we need another sand down, another few coats of various things to protect. And then we're pretty much there. At this point, I think I've spent about 8 hours total. About an hour last night getting all the bits, and about 7 hours over the course of today actually putting it together. So for less than a day's work, that's not too bad. So it's the day after. We've done pretty much everything now. Coat of varnish is dried. The last little bit of work I've done is just to cut some short sections of aluminium angle, which I'm going to just stick on around the side here, if you can see that in the dark. I'm going to stick those on with epoxy. They're not structural, the structure is in the wood glue in here, but these are just to protect the edges if anything gets particularly bashed. I'm likely to be moving houses a few times over the next 2 years, so just want it to be fairly rugged for protection during transport and so on. So here we are back at TS Towers, having vacated my parents' garage. You can see the boards have come out reasonably well. The construction seems pretty strong. It's had a few knocks in the car on the way back here, so it's all survived that absolutely fine. And it fits the track plan reasonably well, which is all very nice. Just got a few more aluminium bits to put on the corners here. Now I think we're done. So next couple of things to do before I start putting track down and things like that. I want to round off the top corners slightly. I'll probably try and do that with some thick card or something, and try my hand at painting a back seam. Not anything fancy, just flat colours, sort of white graduating up to a sort of darker grey. But we'll see how that goes when we get there. For now, I'm pretty happy with my new board.